And again, my name is Moore. I'm a software engineer for VMTurbo, and I want to talk to you today about multi-cloud environments. Okay, so let's take a quick look at what we have right here. And this is an environment that runs only public cloud providers. It has SoftLayer, Azure, and AWS. Now, in this case, again, the supply that we're talking about is money. It's how much money you spend to run workloads on the public cloud. And the demand, again, is the same. It's the demand that comes in from the applications. Now, different templates are priced differently, not only on each public cloud provider, but on different regions of every public cloud provider. So if we take a look at some of the recommendations that we have here, you'll see that we have SoftLayer is generally cheaper than AWS. So you'll see multiple moves from AWS to SoftLayer. At the same time, there's also moves between AWS West 1 to AWS West 2, which for the specific template that this VM is running is cheaper on a different location at this moment. Right. So you'll see a few of those. And at the same time, there are some templates that are actually cheaper on AWS than they are on SoftLayer. So you'll see moves in both directions because it requires an understanding of the specific price per template, per data center on every public cloud provider that you want to be able to exploit or run on or utilize. And again, as we discussed earlier,
automating such moves is impossible. Number one, and even if you wanted to do it, the data has to also move, which becomes much more of a challenge than moving, a virtual machine or a Linux app or something like that.
Right. So we focus on stateless applications.
Stateless.
For this use case, for these scenarios. Again, as we discussed in the hybrid cloud.
Having a stateless application and having a stateless application without persistent data are two different things. I mean, stateless with no persistent data, is that what we're talking about here? I guess so.
In most cases, yes. I mean, you can also decide that you run multiple instances of the data on each public cloud provider to make this easier.
So, Ray, stateless is the new erasure coding. Yes. Ray loves erasure coding. Yes. He's like a world authority on it.
You could be stateless.
You're going to make me stateless, did you say?
What is it with you two? It was throwing tables yesterday. Now it's making each other stateless. What's going on?
I'm moving.
To a different state.
I didn't do anything.
So, I think that this use case is a use case that we've never presented at Tech Field Day before. It's the newest use case that we support. And yes, it caters to more advanced users, and that's where we think the future is. Together with containers that would facilitate and moving to containers will require a lot of enterprises to re-architect, rewrite, re-engineer their applications, making it easier for them to run in a stateless manner, making multi-cloud scenarios possible and beneficial.
I have a question, probably a stupid question, but so you containers or whatever they are, so stateless machines, but in the moment you move something to another cloud provider and you don't have control of the network in the middle, latency and whatever, the risk is that you move something and you pay a lot in latency and whatever, and you have to come back.
So again, we have an understanding, if you have flow collectors, of the communication patterns between your different workloads. So if you have...
But you have these flow collectors in the public internet now.
So think of it this way. The flow between two communicating applications, in the same way we talk about an application having lots of transactions generating more revenue. If there's a lot of communication between two applications, right, there's a cost to that. The further those applications are apart, the more expensive that is. So what VMTurbo does is, as one of the commodities, so if you think about it, they have a budget and a basket of commodities. It may be, I cannot afford to keep communicating with this application across, this length. I need to be more co-located. And so maybe what it is in a stateless world, it's you don't move the container. You just spin up a new container so that they're nicely co-located.
Exactly.
So that's how you avoid the latency. Latency effectively is priced with everything else in the model.
And if the location where they are currently co-running becomes expensive, then we would generate recommendations and actions to move them together to a different public cloud provider, to a different location on the same cloud provider, and so on. Right? Because we understand that, because the economic scheduling engine knows that it's cheaper to run them together.
And if you've got like an express route into Azure, and it's totally Azure, right, not Asia.
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
It's Azure.
Asia's the
Or like direct connecting to AWS, then your latency is not going to be like it is going over. It's not going to be the same as it is in the same data hall, right? But it's not going to be like going over the public internet, right?
When we show you when we have to turn off the cameras, sorry everybody on the internet, we'll show you the partner we're working with. The thing we're leveraging with that partner is exactly that, a very secure, very fast pipe.
No, what I was going to say is because you're monitoring all this traffic coming into the AWS, Google Compute, wherever I might be, whatever my public cloud choice is. If I detect a flood of communication coming from a different part of the world, does it also make decisions on saying, hey, you need to spin up nodes over here to accommodate this flow? Because now you've got this massive amount of connections coming from, say,
Asia.
Right,
Asia,
like,
Russia,
like a
anywhere.
regionally
Asia or
regional
Azure.
intelligence.
Yeah, Nigel's house.
I think the answer to this one's going to be no this time.
No, I think it's going to be yes.
Yeah.
So there's a
It's on the
caveat
way.
to that. The answer is no. If we don't know the two endpoints, then we can't co-locate them.
Yeah.
At least at this point, it's an interesting use case, and we might think about supporting it in the future. But but we currently don't run a location trace on an IP that we detect, or on it.
We haven't had a customer ask push for it.
Exactly.
You just do
If
all
there's enough demand, as I said, it's all about supply and demand. So if there's enough demand for such a feature, then we might think about it.
Because I would think that would be, I don't know. We can talk about that more later.
We're still relatively
No.
early, but you finally found one. Stumped the.
There's an SDK, build it.
That's right.
Yeah?
Oh, it's done here.
Just right now, it's quiet.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do
Justin's
think
coding it, actually.
I think that is a future of where public cloud.
Yeah, because I mean, as you
Organization-
start putting stuff in the cloud,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, you already have access to the data
Yeah.
centers
Yep.
that this stuff can run on. So
I do think though today it's a lot, or enterprises are very much departmental in how they're thinking about this.
Right.
So the applications are
Yeah,
not that
bigger.
globally spanning, and so. But I think that's where we're going. Well, the world's
okay,
going. but-
fair enough.
Okay, so these are the moves and how those decisions are being made. And at the same time, as I've said before, we also tell you when you need to switch to a different template, whether it's an investment, which in case increasing resources, moving to a bigger template in order to assure the application performance, or in other cases it would be, as I've showed you in the first use case, reducing the resources, resizing them down to save supply, to free up resources for other workloads. It's investment versus saving. Okay. And
How long has this been available?
so this is, can we say about our partnership?
So this is not. Yeah, this is not. This what Moore just showed is actually not in our GA product. This is still. We're showing you work in progress to be.
How long have you been working with it in the public cloud?
Well, so adding public clouds as target has been 5.0, which is November of 2014.
And have you managed to detect any failures or quirkiness within any of those clouds as a result of some of the data you've had back?
We didn't run a lot of analytics on the data that we run. It's hybrid clouds in general, multi-clouds especially. There are not a lot of big enterprises that have already embraced this. This is relatively new, and again, we try to consider what risks will be added to organizations with these new technologies, whether it's Kubernetes, containers, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, and say, what can VMTurbo do to prevent the risk and ease adopting these technologies within bigger customers and enterprises?
The reason I was asking, I'm just wondering if you could get to a situation where you were like predicting earthquakes, where
We're hoping to predict cloud
They can
quakes.
do
We
that.
want to
where you're
predict cloud
predicting
quakes,
a
actually, yes.
Yeah, because
Yes.
So-
if you see unpredictable behavior or stuff that hasn't happened before,
Massive
And you actually
power
see it
outage,
before-
ice storm and stuff.
Right.
yeah.
whatever
What
that, you know.
things-
Well, but it's fascinating actually if you think about it. In a private data center hardware situation, hardware doesn't just fall over instantaneously, right? It usually degrades before it all falls over. VMTurbo sees that, like you said. It's as if you're detecting an earthquake. Actually, it's a perfect analogy, because there are a lot of earthquakes that are happening all the time that we don't sense, but there are certain things that do sense it. And in this way, VMTurbo, because the price, it might be very hidden to the naked eye. That price is rising for certain things. Things are moving off it before it actually falls down, so before the earthquake actually hits. The fascinating thing will be when we have more customers in the public cloud, the data we'll be able to get and to be able to anonymize and then show how your instances are running compared to others is going to be one of the more fascinating and fun things we'll be able to work with.
But I will add that the data that we collect only exists at the customer site. We don't have access to it. We don't read it. It's private to the customer. So
Which is fair enough at the moment, but that's, if you think about that as a scenario,
exactly.
being able to say that, we've detected a problem at this,
Yeah.
in this particular data center of this particular cloud provider and start to move things away, would be a
That's an
really
interesting use
interesting
case.
scenario.
Yes.
Yeah.
How's the product priced, or what's how much does this cost?
I'm the engineer. I'll defer that to the expert.
He's the price guy. So we don't speak publicly about pricing, but I'll say a couple things. So we license based on sockets, right?
Sockets.
Yep, in your data center. Our goal is to make sure every customer sees a full return on their investment within 1 year. So it's, and I think probably 91% of them see it within 3 months. So you can argue we should probably raise our price, but so it's typically sockets.
Man, shouldn't it? Surely.
Some
Spot price for VMTurbo.
The other
SaaS
one,
version.
moving more into typically service providers, more public cloud use cases, it's VM based or instance based. So how many you want us to control, and then we use that. But the majority today are still socket based.
So the smallest license is a bunch of sockets, so 3 sockets.
There's actually,
6 sockets.
there's
so
actually a
the
free.
classic,
Yeah,
VMware Essential. No,
Sorry.
the smallest license you can provide.
Oh, the smallest we provide? Yeah, we do have people who have licensed 4 servers, so typically 8 sockets. We also have a free version that for anybody who's got, it's only VMware, but 1 vCenter cluster with 4 hosts or less, they can use it absolutely for free. And they can see the value of the decisions in that, 1 VMware cluster, and then hopefully convince them to kind of expand and spend more. So it's really, for us, it's all about showing the user, getting them to use it and quickly be able to understand.
Or no cost.
And typically we have a free 30-day trial once we get onto pricing. Sometimes maybe it takes more than 30 days to make the decision, or in a smaller environment. So that's what the freemium model helps with. The free model.
What's a deployment take in a sizable environment for something like this?
It's very. I would say 4 days for some of our largest environments in production. You're talking about 100,000 workloads.
There's an example of one of the world's largest technology providers, 2 letters, you can probably guess, out in California. I think they started with about 23,000 VMs. In fact, one of the gentlemen who ran it spoke at our TurboFest Silicon Valley last year, and he said, at our scale, everything breaks. But what he saw was within 5 hours, it was fully deployed and was returning decisions, which is the first time.
Actionable decisions.
Actionable decisions.
Really?
Yeah. So that's because it's discovering everything automatically itself, and
So it's pretty quick to see value. Okay, one other use case that I want to cover before we turn off the cameras is another thing that's pretty hard when you're talking about multi-cloud scenarios. Where do you initially deploy? Where is the cheapest place? So we have our deploy tab where you can just say, let's think about a workload name. Let's say tech field day, awesome. Okay? And we want one instance of that workload. We want, again, this is, as we talked about, we have reservations as well. But in this case, we want to deploy it right away. And I've chosen a template, and I've chosen a service catalog item. And let's see what it finds. So again, this goes and queries pricing from all public cloud providers. So it can take a little while to return the exact optimal initial placement for the workload, and it came up with AWS West. Let's deploy it. And at the same time, we could go into AWS and see it being deployed. And tech field day, awesome. Do you see it right here in AWS West? So it's running, and in a few minutes we'll be able to go back to our system and see it being discovered and add it into the real-time control to make sure that even though we initially placed it where it was cheapest, as I said, prices continuously change. It is not necessarily the template that I manually chose from a list of templates that's available is not necessarily the best choice for the workload, and at the same time, it's not necessarily continuously the cheapest place to run it. So once we discover it in our system, it will come back to our real-time control to make sure that we are paying the cheapest we can to run that workload and assure its performance at all times.
And that's really the key. It's not just about a cloud broker that looks at price alone. It's really saying, okay, what's the best trade-off between cost and performance?
How new is that as a feature?
Very.
The deploy or the fact that it sees it across multiple clouds?
The whole thing, to be honest. the deploy and the fact that it sees it is pretty new, yeah.
So actually, deploy into AWS was introduced November 2014 when we introduced AWS into our system and hybrid cloud scenarios. Azure was, I think, 3 months later. Don't take my word on it, though, but it's not today or yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the new is the right. It's the real-time cost.
Yeah.
That's new.
That's new.
New.
Yeah, the multi-cloud.
Yes.
The multi-cloud and the real cost of running it, the dollar cost associated.
Yeah.
That is, the deploy capability in general. It works on VC, on Hyper-V, on Zen as well, right? So if you are running a hybrid cloud environment, if you can accommodate the resources on your private data center, that's where we're going to recommend to deploy it. And if not, just as I showed you now, we'll take a look at public cloud providers and find the best placement for the workload that you wanted to deploy.
Hey, I'm just curious, how many rough percentage of your customers use Zen?
Smallish number, but
Yeah, I mean, it's actually
Relatively low.
Less than
So I mean, purely Zen on its own, it's
not that small.
no, yeah, purely like a pure Zen environment, very small, but I mean hybrid, right? So we've got a lot of VMware and Zen mixed environments. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean probably at least 100 of mixed environments.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I can just tap into that via the API and automate
Yes.
the whole flow, and it automatically select where.
No, I'm still wondering a few things, but
Well, no,
we'll
go
have
ahead.
time.
Go ahead, ask.
Yeah.
We have time.
People are still listening.
So now, in the whole discussion, I didn't understand how you manage complex services in providers like Amazon, for example. So if I'm using database as a service and many other of their services, okay, and I have all the applications that I brought, and actually they are working with these services. So it's not just scaling out the application or scaling out my application, even if it's written in the right way, because you have to know that if it's okay or not.
So
But there is also the other part that is not clear to me.
I understand. We currently only support EC2 and Elastic Load Balancer as services, but we are looking and talking with our biggest customers on how we move to support more and more services of all the different public cloud providers and how we make decisions on controlling them, what are the risks associated with them, and how we combine all of these services together. So that's something that we are working on. It is in our roadmap. We are looking into how to integrate that as well.
Yes. The other thing I would add is and more showed Kubernetes. We released support for Cloud Foundry. I mean, you'll see the other major PaaS provider will support for that this year. If you're running those on AWS, right? So we are now, to us, the fact that it's AWS is to some extent abstracted.
Abstracted, yeah.
And now we're playing at that level, right? At the Kubernetes level, at the PaaS level, and making decisions there that are assuring performance.
Okay.
So I probably missed it, but how do you keep track in multi-cloud of the pricing in those clouds? Is that
We use their APIs.
Yeah.
you just hook into them and that's
Yeah,
updated as soon as they update it?
Yep.
And
you add your credentials for those API keys. Different cloud providers work with it differently. And then when we query, some of them is that when we query the API, we directly get your prices at this time. And then for others, it's a little bit more complex. But for most of them, we just query the API and get the cost at this moment for the specific workload for your specific contract.
Hey, right, so most of your customers are VMware customers, right?
Yes.
And when it comes to public cloud providers that they use, what's the mix, what's the kind of balance between AWS and Azure? It's just we have this kind of thing, at least some of us do, that Azure has a real appeal to enterprise customers and AWS less so.
Well, it depends on the type of application as well.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah.
you stole the words out of my mouth. I think we're seeing. I think so. Going back to about a year ago, we were probably seeing more AWS. I'd say more recently, we're seeing more and more Azure, and it is your typical. Well, I don't know. At least the conversations I've been in.
Right.
Very large insurance companies, banks. It's kind of more. I don't know if it's got that reputation, but that's at least what we're seeing.
And are those customers currently using AWS and moving to Azure, or are they not using public cloud at all and they see Azure as more of a viable option for them? I'm just curious, right? And I'm not.
Yeah,
I think it's a bit of both.
Scientific.
It is a both. I mean, the ones I'm thinking off the top of my head were purely. I mean, they'd made a decision to go to Azure.
Yeah.
And actually, the decision to go to Azure predated them working with VMTurbo, and we've come in as a control platform both what they have on-prem and for Azure.
Yeah. All right.
Better dust off that Azure stuff.
Don't like working with Azure.
Yeah.
Hateful, man.
I do think that, enterprises like having multiple providers, right? So I do think a lot of them, even if they're AWS, they're going to add another one. They don't want to have a.
They don't want a similar problem as they have with the vendor lockdown,
Yeah.
right? So they've already experienced that with big vendors. They don't want to have that again with public cloud providers. So they're looking to multiple options.
I mean, think of Spinnaker, think of all the things that are being placed out there to really encourage multiple options so that you don't have lock-in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's smart. It's
Yeah.
smart. Netflix is kind of genius in doing that. It's smart for them, even if they are right now just on AWS.
Sorry, what was that? Netflix are only on AWS.
Oh, they're only on or they're on multiple.
No.
Yeah, as I understood, they were only AWS, but they.
Recently that they want to.
I'm actually I was citing your article
I don't know
more on
what the
Spinnaker than
status of
anything.
that.
Yeah, I wrote an article on it. That I was told in emphatic terms by Netflix that
they were
they are
no.
AWS and they are a valued partner and so on and so forth.
That just that makes Spinnaker that much more interesting.
Yeah, Walmart is, however, because they just
Yep.
released OneOps, which is
Yep,
about
OneOps,
that
yeah.
whole idea of multi-cloud.
Yeah. I mean, it's smart. It's the power in some ways is shifting, I think, to the users versus necessarily the vendors.